I never want to touch a peach ever again. Like, ever again.
Call Me By Your Name was directed by this gentleman, whose name I can't pronounce, and stars Timothée Chalamet, Armie Hammer, and Michael Stuhlbarg. This is the story of two young men living in northern Italy in the early 80s. It's the story of their bond, which grows over the course of a summer. Now, this review is going to be a bit different from our normal format. Chris and I had two very different reactions to this film, so instead of doing a pros and cons section, we're just going to share our specific opinions about the movie, both the good and the bad. So I would say that my favorite part of this movie is definitely the acting. Armie Hammer does an absolutely amazing job in his role, and I am completely floored that he did not get nominated for Best Actor. Michael Stuhlbarg as well does a really good job playing the dad of one of the boys. And again, he got snubbed as well, which really angers me. These two really just carried the movie for me. They both gave portrayals that were very, very real. I also really liked the direction of this movie. I thought that it looked really nice and that there were a lot of directional choices that made it feel very real again. It almost felt like I was watching a home movie. This whole movie has a very unconventional feel to it. There are a lot of choices here that I haven't seen in any other movies, and I can definitely appreciate that. Not all of them landed the way that I feel like the director thought that they would, but I can appreciate the unconventional aspect of this movie. I also really loved the soundtrack of this movie. Elio, one of the young men, plays piano, and so a lot of the songs are really moving, emotional piano pieces that really helped set the tone of the movie for me. Now we kind of get into the bad, though. This is a movie that is extremely hyped up. It's been getting great reviews from other critics. There's been a lot of marketing about how great this movie is. So there was a bit of anticipation going into this theater. And unfortunately, in this case, I found the movie to be kind of disappointing. I did not find it to come anywhere near the standards that people have set for it. My biggest problem with this movie is the pacing. It felt almost like 5 hours. I was sitting in that theater for so long, even though this is a relatively short movie at 2 hours and 12 minutes. And a big reason for that is one of those unconventional choices that I mentioned before. This is a movie where not a lot happens. It's really just sort of planting yourself in the lives of these two characters. And so there are a lot of scenes that feel very meandering, that left both of us scratching our heads wondering why that was even put in the movie. All in all, I felt that I did understand what the director was going for with this movie, but in the end I was left just a little disappointed. Now I'm going to turn this mic over to Chris, who has a lot to say about this movie. That's putting it lightly.
Alright guys, I'm going to level with you. I am absolutely stunned at how much I hated this movie. I had some extremely high expectations going into this. I thought it was going to be on the same level as like a Lady Bird or a Moonlight. Something that I could actually see the appeal and be like, okay, I can see why somebody would like that, but maybe not for me. No, I think this movie is actually terrible. First and foremost, let's talk about Timothée Chalamet. I believe I'm saying his name right. He was nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role for his performance of Elio in this movie. Holy crap. I do not understand what the hype is here. He had no personality. There was nothing about him that was like, I connect with you. No, he was just this bland, just nothing of a person on screen. He felt like a lost puppy, in all honesty. Like, there was nothing that made me want to sympathize with him. And in a character-driven movie like this, that is so crucially important to have some really excellent characters. But I did not feel that at all with Timothée Chalamet in this movie. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of that is due in part to the fact that he has no backstory You know nothing about this character. He's just this 17-year-old kid that's thrown on screen, and you're just supposed to kind of feel for him. And there are some moments where it's like, okay, yeah, you can understand where he's coming from and why he might feel bad or something. But the movie as a whole is so inconsequential. There is nothing here that makes you think, oh, something bad might happen. No, this is just these characters that are in almost this perfect world to an extent. And that's one of the issues with this movie, one of the really big blaring issues that I'm surprised that more people haven't talked about. And that is the portrayal of gay culture in this movie. I know this is treading on thin ice here, but the biggest issue I have is this movie takes place in the early 1980s when gays really were not accepted. Yet in this movie, it's portrayed as if everybody just accepts all the gay characters. Everybody is just cool with it. They don't even question it, to the point where even the parents are looking at this kid who has kind of come out of the closet, and they're like, oh yeah, that's cool, I'm really happy for you. There's nothing here, kind of like last year's Moonlight, where it actually felt like, okay, this kid was trying to hide his feelings of being gay, whereas this movie, yeah, he's still trying to hide them, but there's no consequence for it. And I think it's a really inaccurate portrayal with how that community actually is in real life. Now, one thing is, I think that this is extremely unrealistic in the depiction of modern day life. I know people that have gone through this, and it really just seems like it's portrayed so wrong. I mean, it makes sense, and I'm glad that people have actually found the strength to come out and be themselves. But the way this movie sets everything up, it just doesn't vibe well with me at all. Now, moving on to more subjective issues that I had with this movie, first and foremost, let's talk about the length of this movie. 2 hours and 12 minutes, not extremely long. I felt like I was in the theater for hours. I checked my phone about an hour and 10 minutes into this movie, and I leaned over to Walter and I'm like, dude, there's still an hour left of this. I was floored at how slow and bored I was with this movie. I just didn't care. I didn't care. I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about the story. I didn't care about anything. And with a movie this slowly paced, that's a huge issue. Now, there are movies like A Ghost Story that came out a couple of months ago that was also similarly very slowly paced, but there was actually meaning behind it. Now, Call Me By Your Name actually does have some meaning, but it shows up in like the last 15 minutes of the movie, and I will admit that is the best part of the movie by far. There's a scene where Elio sits down with his father, and his father is talking to him about living your life to the fullest, and I loved that. But it took so long to get there, and there was nothing building up to it either. Now, as for the directing of this movie, bits and pieces of it were done correctly, I think. There were some scenes that were shot extremely well, but there are other parts of this that I couldn't help but notice and just sit there in the theater just like, how was this included in the final feature? It didn't make any sense. And some of those scenes included one where they're trying to show you the entire landscape, like the entire set that this scene is taking place in. And the camera pans all the way across, but the whole screen was blurred. You couldn't see anything. It was just this mess of color and just nothingness, and then it all of a sudden ends up on just these two characters. And it's like, what was the point of that? Why didn't you slowly pan to show where they are and show how beautiful this set actually is? And then there's another scene that depicts two characters kissing, and the entire shot is out of focus completely. The whole time I was like, okay, focus on something. I don't even care if it's the background, just focus on something. And it never did. I felt like I was watching The Room in some parts of this movie. It was sad. Speaking of movies like The Room, now I do not want to compare this movie to The Room. These two movies are completely on different levels, don't get me wrong here. But there are some scenes that almost reminded me of that, where a scene just starts and it's like, where's the context? Where is this coming from? It's like, I won't go into explicit detail, but there are characters that are sitting around at a table and just having a nice dinner, and then all of a sudden it's like, they say something and it's like, why is your mind in the gutter? Why? Just why? Speaking of pointless scenes, this movie has plenty of them. In fact, there are some characters in this movie that are kind of in charge of scenes here, and they don't have a character. They're not really anybody. They're just them. And there's one scene in particular where these two people are just bickering back and forth, and there's like subtitles at the bottom. And this scene goes on for so long that eventually I'm like reading these subtitles and I'm like, this is leading to nothing. This makes no sense. This is pointless. This is stupid. And another blaring issue with this movie and the characters within this movie is that there is one driving force for these characters, and the main character in particular. And that driving force is sex, unfortunately. That is the only thing that carries this movie forward. That's it. Every single character, aside from his parents, it's like, is this person somebody that I could have a relationship with? And it gets old. It's like, let's add some character to this guy. Let's give him something else, another reason to care about him other than, oh, he's with this person, now he's with this person, now he's with this person. I don't care. I just don't care. And last but not least, let's talk about the age gap between the two main characters. There has been a lot of controversy surrounding that. Elio, the main character of this movie, is 17 years old, which in Italy, that is legal. Not going to say anything about that. And the other character is 24 years old. A little bit weird. Now, that could be all fine and dandy and everything, but it just seems awkward. These two characters are so far apart in age that the chemistry just does not feel like it's there. It is creepy to an extent that this guy that's so much older than this 17-year-old kid, they're in a relationship, it just feels off. Now, even though Elio is the main character in this movie, there are sequences in this film that follow him for a very distractingly long period of time. This movie is based around the relationship between Elio and Oliver. Oliver, in my opinion, is the best character in this movie, except for maybe Mr. Perlman. And it sucks to see just these long, drawn-out sequences where it's just Elio and nothing's happening. It's like, let's bring in Oliver, let's have some good dialogue between them. Let's have something that develops this relationship other than their relationship, to keep it G-rated here. It doesn't make sense, and it adds to the fact that this movie is so long and so boring. Ultimately, I think this movie is way, way overhyped. Guys, if you want to see a movie that depicts a story kind of like what's in Call Me By Your Name, go watch Moonlight. Moonlight is a much, much better movie in every sense of the word. I think it's a lot more accurate in the depiction. The story makes more sense. The characters are actually interesting, unlike this movie. Go watch Moonlight. Skip this one.
So, two very different reactions to this movie. All in all, I do not think that I wasted my time with this movie. I think that it's definitely worth seeing at some point, but it ultimately felt pretty disappointing. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
As you can probably guess, I did not like this movie whatsoever. It was boring. I didn't care about the characters. Guys, if you want to take my word for it, which you don't have to, I say skip it. 3 out of 10.